That is so awesome. I would have thought that you say you'd mentioned Zappos or Apple even, but I've never heard of Chewy, so this is fantastic. So as a solopreneur, right? Aside from being responsive, actually no, let me take it back. There's a fine line, right? There's a fine line between the customer is always right and customer experience. How do you find that fine line and not just bend over backwards to horrible customers?
That's a great question. And I think that the customer is not always right, but I think they're right more often than we want to give them credit.
Okay,
And so
that's fair.
the truth is that, sometimes what customers say to us hurts, right? Because they've had a bad experience, they're upset, and we don't really want to admit that we provided a bad experience. And that's why I say that, that complaints are so important. And even in the business world, when you get a review at the end of the year from your boss, if all you get is a review that tells how awesome you are, that's not really that helpful. The best reviews are the ones that say, here's your opportunities to get better. Mm-hmm. And all of us should want that, and all of us should treat feedback like a gift. I always ask for feedback when I get off stage because I want people to tell me, hey, I loved this example, and you did really well over here. This example didn't really hit the mark with me. And I'll take that feedback and I'll either rework the example or I'll exclude it from my next speech because it's important to me that I'm delivering something that people are excited about and can respond to.
Yeah.
And so I do think that some of it is just checking your ego at the door and being willing to take that feedback, good, bad, and ugly, and get better because of it. Let's not forget that when people compliment us, we also should be taking that and saying, I should be doing more of that, right? Oh,
yeah.
Dan, I really liked this story. Okay, well, guess what? That story is going to stay in my keynote. I'm going to keep doing that story as long as people say they like it. Likewise, if a customer says to you, hey, you did this really well, or thank you so much for remembering my birthday or whatever, that should tell you, keep remembering their birthday.
Right.
So it does work in both directions.
So I love that because I'm with you. I don't think the customer is always right. I love the ego stuff. It does hurt. But how do you know that it's just, one person's opinion or generally you're messing up, right? Because I always say this. Do you remember the stuff where they offended, like, oh, I'm offended, There's JP Sears, who always makes satire videos on YouTube, created a whole video about, oh, I'm being offended. And someone is like, here, take this book. It's fantastic for you. It will help you dating. And he's like, I'm offended that you think I'm attracted to women. He's like, aren't you? He's like, yes, but I'm offended that you assume so, right? So how do you know that the person that you're talking to is not just like overly sensitive, or it's just like a word that triggers them but has nothing to do with what you're talking about, or if it's a really, a real issue that you need to address?
Yeah, I mean, especially in today's culture, we have to be a lot more careful because people can get offended at different things. And I always talk, for example, about using humor in marketing. Humor can be super effective in marketing, but it's also risky.
Yeah.
Because what I find to be funny, you might find to be offensive. And so we have to be careful of that line. And I think that, what I would say is if I ever said something on stage, or if I was ever, consulting with a company that offended somebody, I would apologize and I would say, look, I didn't mean to offend you. Thank you for letting me understand, why you were offended. I still think you can make that right with somebody. That said, you're right that sometimes, you'll have complaints about, man, your app doesn't work. And it's one person. Yeah. And you test it and you ask other customers and the app works for everybody else and you realize, okay, this is probably user error.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like the machine in front of the machine.
Yeah, exactly. And you try to help that person, but you realize it's not a major problem. Whereas, no joke, I've been at companies that have figured out that their website is down from Twitter. Like even before their IT department figured it out, because when people can't log in, they light up Twitter.
That's true.
And so in that case, hey, thank goodness for Twitter, because we wouldn't have known until our IT department figured out that the site was down. So I think that it is a line, and obviously we do have to be careful not to offend. There was a case that I had at one company I worked for where luckily the marketing team and the customer service team were very well connected and they communicated with each other. And this is really important to creating a good experience, because if marketing goes out there and puts a special or a sale and customer service doesn't know about it, and then you call in and you talk to an agent and they don't have any idea what you're talking about, it's very frustrating. But this company, they had a really good relationship. And there was a television commercial that went on the air and got some feedback from people that was unexpected. People felt that this particular television commercial represented a certain minority group in a way that was not flattering. And certainly that was not the company's intention. And they had done a lot of research, including with that minority group, and had gotten good feedback. But then when it was out in the real world, they heard this kind of feedback. And the good news is that very quickly the customer service team got to circle back with the marketing team and make a decision about whether we're going to pull this commercial or not. And I think they ended up pulling it. But I think the reason it wasn't a PR disaster was because there wasn't any intention to offend, right? Mm-hmm. It just happened that, the joke they told didn't land as well as they thought, and they were willing to hear that feedback and change it.